Welcome back. I'm McNew, and this is Duty, Grit, and Grinds. In the first several episodes, I have told stories of opportunities that have gone my way, about blessings that I have been given, and about success. But I don't want to leave anyone with the wrong impression. You see, there have been many opportunities to fail, and I have. I have done many boneheaded things. I have done many well-intended things that have gone wrong, and I have had plenty of failures. We all have moments where we fall short, where the plan unravels, or where we miss the mark. And I'm no stranger to that. In 43 years of life, there have been many times where I have dropped the ball, made the wrong call, and flat out failed. So these opportunities do not define me. They are lessons and an opportunity to recalibrate, a time to push forward with a little more grit. So let's take some time to hear some stories about failure, times that have humbled me, challenged me, and taught me to do better. I suppose I'll open with a story about safety, about workplace safety equipment, occupational safety, and how we all, as employees, as workers, are responsible for our own safety. How we cannot rely on others to provide that for us. We all should take that burden on. Many of us work in jobs that are inherently dangerous, and we are often provided tools and training, but it's our job to make sure that the tools are ready to roll and that we stay up to date on our training, because at the end of the day, it's our butts that are on the line. And so I'm going to start with a story about occupational safety. I mentioned in previous episode that I worked for a logging operation for my grandpa's logging company when I was 15, 16 years old, and I was running a cat. And just to remind everyone, a cat is a piece of heavy machinery. It's a tracked vehicle. It's like a bulldozer. It's got a spool of wire, cable on the back, and it's used to drag logs in from the woods. So cutters out in the forest will cut the trees down. They buck them into manageable sizes. They take the limbs off, and they lay in piles out in the woods. The landing would be the spot near the road where the log trucks come, and the machines load the trucks so that the trucks can haul the logs to the mill where they're processed. And so we're talking about Doug fir. We're here in the Pacific Northwest, and we're talking about Douglas fir. And so my job was to go out into the forest where the cutters had put trees on the ground, hook up to 3 of them, 4 of them sometimes if they were smaller, and drag them to where the log trucks could load them. So to do this, you had to drive the cat out into the woods, position it backside facing the pile of logs. And just to be clear, it's not like they fall in nice little organized piles side by side. They just fell all crisscross in any different way. There's limbs everywhere, and it's a big old mess. You can't easily see them sometimes. Sometimes you drive right through them, right past them, right over top of them. Sometimes you hook up to them, and as you're pulling, you thought it would pull out, and it doesn't, and it snaps. And, these trees are like, they are our product. They're the things we're hauling and sending to the mill. And a broken one is dollars lost. And so it's a fairly complicated process for a 15, 16-year-old driving heavy machinery, dragging these things out, threading the needle, and trying to find, the right geometry to pull one straight. And it's a lot of work on the cat, off the cat, on the cat, off the cat, pulling the cable, hooking up one, getting it straight, pulling the cable back out, getting a second one. And it's a lot of work. And so you grab these logs, you haul them into the landing, and that's the whole job. Back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. When you get to the landing, you unhook them and you push them into a pile and you go back out. And every trip from the moment you start, I'm watching Grandpa, who is running the show back at the landing. And he's the one who's going to give you hand signals for a couple of very important times a day. He'll give you this one at lunchtime. And I'm waiting. Even on the first trip, I've been at a half hour, I'm waiting for lunch. And then he'll give you the signal at the end of the day to call it a day. And so I come into the landing one day and he gives the old lunch symbol. So I throw it in park, turn the machine off, and we're all going to circle up and eat our sandwiches. It's 10, 11 o'clock. And there's another guy running machine too. And he's telling a story about how he was off wherever he was grabbing logs and he ran into some bees. He ran over a beehive. You see, the beehives hang from trees. This is a biology lesson. The beehives hang from trees. And when the tree falls down, the beehive is now on the ground. And then when the big old tracked machine comes along and crushes it, these already angry bees, whose house is now on the ground, start to swarm and they get really angry and they're really upset and they do bee stuff. And so he's telling this story and I said, well, what did you do? He says, what can I do? I, drove as fast as I could, swatting bees away, because it's not like we're in an enclosed cab. These are old machines. We're a small-time operation. These are fully open cages that we are sitting in, the cabs of these vehicles, where it's just you and wide open country. And so he tells the story, and I thought, I don't care for not having a contingency for this. And this is 15, 16-year-old me thinking, I need a plan. If I run into bees, what am I going to do? And so I'm taking my occupational safety very seriously, and I'm going to be responsible for my own well-being. And I come up with a plan. You see, in my machine, and I was going to say in a bracket, but it was not in a bracket. It was bungee corded to the cage is a fire extinguisher. A big, heavy, one of the giant ones, a big fire extinguisher is bungee wrapped to the cage. And I thought, I've seen enough TV and movies to know that the bees with the hives where they get the honey, they use the little smoke machines, and that's how they get the honey. And I thought, this is the same. I'm going to use this fire extinguisher to escape from angry bees if that day ever comes. And so I worked through that in my head. You got a lot of time running back and forth from the landing to the woods to think, because it's not, these were the days of Discman and Walkman. And, I'm not running a Discman and a Walkman every day because batteries were expensive. And so all you had to entertain yourself were your thoughts, your daydreams. And so I'm just walking through in my head what I might do if there's a bee, and any number of other things as your mind wanders, singing to yourself, doing, goofy stuff. And so time goes by, and eventually I put bees out of my mind. And I don't know how much time passed. It could have been the same job or a different job. It could have been weeks or months or even the next year. But one day I am trucking through the brush. I do remember the terrain. It was very steep. There was peaks of several ridges to get from the landing out to where we were going. It's very steep country. And I come up and over a ridge. And as the cat crashes down on a pile of branches, there is an explosion of bees. Bees everywhere. I had crushed the mega nest, and there was just bees everywhere. Angry bees buzzing me, stinging me, and they are everywhere. And so I don't panic because I have planned for this. I have rehearsed this in my mind. It's time to deploy the fire extinguisher. And so I unbuckle it. It's not in a bracket. We're a small time operation. This thing is bungeed to the cage behind me. I grab it. I pull the pin. I take the little hose off and I pull the lever. And nothing happens. You see, it's either there or shortly after that it occurs to me that this fire extinguisher was for looks. It was ornamental. It was so that as I'm coming and going, if somebody from maybe some state occupational safety entity is at the landing or whatever, drives by on the road, I've got my fire extinguisher. I'm checking that box. But it was empty. There, not a squirt, not a puff comes out of this thing. And so now I'm standing there with a big red fire extinguisher, getting all stung and bees everywhere. And I did the only thing I could do is run. I ran away from the bees. I ran however far, not all the way back to the landing, but I ran a good distance. They eventually stopped chasing me, and I stood there with this empty fire extinguisher in my hands. And looking back, here's where I went wrong. I assumed that this important piece of safety equipment was ready to roll. I assumed that the person who mounted it to the cage did it properly, that they verified that it was fully charged and ready to fight a fire. Now, they could have had no way of knowing that I was planning to use it in the case of a bee attack, but one way or the other, this thing was not ready. It was empty. And so the failure in this is that I made the assumption that this fire extinguisher was ready to roll. This very critical piece of equipment for my emergency plan, for my contingency in the case of a bee attack. I made the assumption that it was ready. Now, if you know anything about fire extinguishers, had I looked closer, I would have been able to see that the gauge read empty. Not that the needle was in the green, but empty. If I had taken this precaution and I had taken this step to verify that my critical piece of safety equipment was ready to roll, this bee incident may have had a different outcome. So when I told the story about losing my finger in the hay conveyor, that was a weekend gig that I had while I was working in the woods, and it was just, a way to make some extra money. I was highly driven, to work. It was the example that was set for me, generation to generation, man and woman in my family. The expectation was work hard, and that was the lesson that I learned. And so in that same time period, before or after losing my finger, I don't remember, I'm working in the woods and I am reading a newspaper. I don't know if all kids or all teen guys read newspapers. I did. I read newspapers, and I see an ad in the newspaper for delivery person. And by my math, when I read this ad, that I might be able to squeeze this into my schedule. You see, it said that the delivery of the newspapers would take place in the early evening, that the delivery people who work for this newspaper, that they receive their supply of newspapers to deliver in the late afternoon, early evening, and that depending on how many houses you have, it's a few hours in the evening and then you're done. And so I thought, well, I'm getting up at 2, 3 in the morning, starting work really early. We're done at 1 or 2 in the afternoon in the summer because of the fire danger. And by that math, I should have time to deliver newspapers and have plenty of time to sleep. And so I don't know how I applied, actually. I couldn't have been an online application or anything. I must have sent them a letter or called them. I'm not sure, but I get the job. Newspaper delivery, very Americana. And so the very first day that the newspapers are supposed to show up, I'm anxiously waiting, right? Because I'm on a tight time schedule. I have to be dressed and standing out on the curb to get picked up and taken out into the woods early in the morning, which means I got to go to bed early in the evening. And so I'm out waiting for my newspapers. Afternoon comes and goes, dinner comes and goes. It's getting into the evening, and I'm actually getting ticked because it was very clear in the posting that these things were going to be delivered early enough for me to finish and get to bed at a reasonable hour. And so eventually they just don't come, and I go, I'm going to bed. I got to be up early, and I don't do mornings now. And I certainly did not do mornings then. When I was in high school, I would get up like 10 minutes before I needed to be out the door. I've showered the night before, like I wasn't gross or anything, I don't think. But I would throw on some clothes. I didn't eat breakfast. From the time I got out of bed to the time I was getting in my car to drive to the high school, it was less than 10 minutes probably. So I just did not do mornings. And so I go to bed. And sometime after I'm asleep, my dad comes into my bedroom and says, "Hey, those newspapers are here." And so I'm like, son of a gun. And so I go out on the porch, and sure enough, the bulk distributor of the newspapers has dropped off newspapers. You know what they didn't say in the advertisement for this job was that they come in a stack of newspapers bound by wire or, whatever, something holding them together, plastic. And you have to cut them out of that, roll them, rubber band them individually, put them in a plastic sleeve before you can deliver them. Now, if you deliver newspapers, you already know this, but I did not know this, and it was not made clear to me. And so before I can deliver these newspapers, I've got a lot of work to do. And so here I am, less than 8 hours before I've got to be up and in the woods, and I'm rolling newspapers, okay? And so then I have this newspaper apron, with the places to put newspapers front and back. I've got it full, packed full. And I did this because I didn't want to make trips back to my house. My math is that I probably am better off on a bicycle than in a car because I've got to make a bunch of stops, and I'm envisioning this like TV, or did you play the game Paperboy, on NES, where he's just going along, shoom, shoom, chucking newspapers, shoom. And you got extra points if it went in the box, and if you broke a window, you lost points, and the dogs would chase you. Okay, so I'm envisioning this. This is I've received no training. I never spoke to a person in face-to-face, in person, and so I'm just making this up. I'm going off of what I've seen in TV and video games. And so I've stuffed this newspaper bag chock full of newspapers, and I'm on my bicycle, probably the same one I will later ride the very grueling bike ride I did that I talked about in a previous episode. But here I'm on the bicycle, carrying, I was going to say hundreds of pounds of newspapers. It can't be hundreds of pounds. It definitely was dozens of pounds of newspapers. And it's very cumbersome. It's very awkward. They stick out really far. And now it's the middle of the night, and I'm on a bicycle riding through town with these newspapers. And the only instructions I was given was was a sheet of paper that said the addresses that I was not to deliver to. Otherwise, this was a free publication that just everyone got. And so one of those newspapers. So it wasn't like you needed a subscription. I was that guy delivering the newspaper that when you woke up in the morning, you were like, I didn't order this. And so now this list of names and addresses where they don't want the newspaper, this is supposed to be important. Like, these are probably people that have complained, like, keep your garbage off my yard. And so that's the only instructions. Don't deliver to these addresses. Okay, so I set out, and I'm going along, and it does not take long to get really frustrated because it does not work like the video game. It does not work like TV. I cannot just chuck these things. I'm barely able to pedal my bike with the weight and the swing of these newspapers. Town is not flat. This is a pretty hilly town, and I am out there busting my ass trying to deliver these newspapers, and it sucks. And it's not going well. And I get about as far from my house as I'm going to get on this journey. And I go from the street up onto the sidewalk to huck a newspaper, and I misjudge the approach of this curb. I misjudge how high I get my tire off the ground, and I hit the curb. My wheel goes spinning, and I endo. And if you're not familiar with the term, that means I went over the handlebars of my bicycle. Newspapers go flying everywhere. And I'm just laying like a lump on the ground. I'm twisted up in the bike. I got, the newspaper thing around my neck. So here I am in the middle of the night in a quiet small town where I grew up, buried in newspapers, left for dead. And it's just not, this night's not going well. And so now I'm ticked. I've got to get only a few hours from now. I have overcommitted myself. I had no business taking on this newspaper thing. It was foolish, to say the least. I did not have time to be delivering newspapers in between work. I should be sleeping. And so now I decide I've got a decision to make. Am I going to continue this route tonight? Am I going to continue this route at all? And no, the answer is no. I gather up the newspapers. I drive to the grocery store, which is on my way back to my house. I take all the newspapers that I have. I dump them in the recycling bin. I ride my bike the rest of the way to my house uphill. I get on the phone and I call the newspaper place and I tell them what I think of their newspapers showing up hours after they were supposed to. I told them where they could find them if they wanted them. And I went to bed. Actually, I wrote my parents a note. Hey, this is what happened. I just quit. I'm a big, huge, dumb failure. And so I felt it sounds like I was angry, and I was, but I also felt like a failure. And so that's the emotions that went into the note. I'm a failure. And so I quit this thing, and it's, I'm a big fat failure. And so that's the time I took on a newspaper delivery route when, boy, I just had no business doing that. The only good to come out of it was one of the things they dropped off was just a lifetime supply of rubber bands. And so I still remember this, I had a Nike shoebox full of rubber bands for like half my life. And just whatever you needed a rubber band for, and whatever teenagers need rubber bands for. But that's the good that came of it. And so that failure is about overcommitting yourself. Know your limits. We all have limits. And I woke up the next morning to go to work in the woods, tired, doing a dangerous job, and it just wasn't sustainable. And now I know better. So when I'm 18 years old, I'm still working in the woods. I'm doing all of that, but that is a summer job only. It's not compatible with school, obviously, right? I'm a high school kid. And so I need a job that I can work all the time. So I'm driving now, and an arrangement we had as teenagers, as a family, is that if you're going to drive, you're going to pay for insurance. This is an arrangement that I've carried on through my kids. If you want to drive, you're going to pay for your insurance and your gas, basically every expense that comes with your car. Oil changes, tires, batteries, insurance, gas. These are going to be your responsibility. This was the expectation of me. And I learned a lot from it. And so passing that on to my kids, driving, of course, is a utility for parents, right? Especially if you have lots of kids or if you have several kids. As soon as your kid starts driving, man, what a relief. Not having to, sit at practices and pick kids up from practices, not having to shuttle them around like a taxi cab, basically. And so surely and certainly there is a utility to a parent for a teen to drive, although it's kind of a nerve-wracking deal. I have now taught 4 teens to drive and 2 to go. And so, but the arrangement we have with them is if you want to drive, you're going to work. And so it starts to, start that process of being out in the real world, seeing what it's like to work, be around, different people and navigate the world. And so that's what I'm responsible for now. And so during school, since I can't work in the woods, I need a job, and I have a buddy who works at a McDonald's near a truck stop. And so he really enjoys it, and he encourages me to apply. So I do. And in this McDonald's was a well-oiled machine. Maybe all their franchises are. What I remember is that it was a very professional process. They brought me on to an orientation at an off-site location. I had to pay for my uniform. I had to go buy some special shoes. I sat through a day of training at this off-site location, and it was legit. It was a real deal. And so I'm trained to work the front counter to take orders. Back in those days, and probably still today, there was different. The people who take orders and hand the orders out are different than the people who prepare the food, cook the food, which a lot of cooking and preparation goes into this whole operation, right? It's not just microwaves. So those people who were trained for that are different than the people who are trained at the front counter and the drive-through. And so I'm trained for that, and I'm doing my thing. I'm going and making, the McFlurry was just invented. It was brand new. And so we're learning the McFlurry machine, and we're doing McDonald stuff. And the McDonald's I worked at was very busy, and I worked there for about 1 month before I get called back to the manager's office. And he says, I'm concerned about the way you're spending your time. And I'm actually pretty surprised by this, because I'm pretty savvy on a computer. I'm having no troubles, no complaints. I'm just up there doing my thing, taking your order. What can I do for you? What can I get you? And he says, part of the problem is that when there are no customers, I'm not staying busy. And I'm kind of surprised by this, because I feel like I'm pulling my weight. There's a checklist. If I'm not busy, I'm out wiping tables or cleaning the lobby or whatever job. And he goes, well, let me give you an example. Yesterday morning, for example, you came to work. I'm like, yep. Store open. Yep. And then we didn't get any customers for a while. And what did you do? I waited for customers. Well, the expectation is that you would wipe down this machine, or clean this machine, or wipe down the counters, or clean the tables, or, whatever, clean the lobby. And I said, the store had just opened. Like, all those jobs were done. We were in a spotless and clean store. There was nothing, or restaurant, there was nothing to clean. And he says, well, the expectation is that you'll stay busy. And I said, and I'm paraphrasing because this isn't a verbatim conversation, but basically I said, let me get this straight. If we're not busy and the store has just opened, the expectation is that I will clean countertops? That I will wipe down clean tables? Yes. Okay, I just can't with that. Let me back up. I understand that this is a bad attitude and that I should have just said Roger. And that's what I would tell my kids to say. This does sound ridiculous, but he's the boss. And if he wants me to clean countertops, Roger, you got it. Want me to clean dishes? Want me to wipe down clean countertops? You bet. You got it. You want me to empty the garbage? Take empty garbage sacks out to the trash can? You got it. But that's not what I said. I got a bad attitude about it. And I said, that sounds ridiculous. And then he said, and he might have had a point here. He says, and it doesn't seem like you're taking the time to properly learn the menu. And so he gave the example. Do you even know what comes on a Big Mac? Nope. My job is, you say Big Mac, and I go, Big Mac, got it. And somebody in the back makes it. And so he did have a point in that I did not put any effort into learning the menu. So he's busting my chops about not clean things and not learning the menu, which he probably had a point. And so then he tells me, I just don't think you have a future in the food service industry. And I'm not proud of this, although it's part of the story, so I'm going to tell it. And I looked at this guy who's like 5 years my elder running this store, and I said, thank God. And it's not like I have anything against, the manager of the McDonald's, but it isn't where I saw myself 5 years from then. And so I, at that point in the conversation, had a very terrible attitude. I should have said Roger and done whatever I was asked, but I was a poor sport who was getting my chops busted, and I insulted this guy. Thank God. So I go back, work my shift, do my thing. Next time the schedule comes out, I've got 4 hours on it. 4. And for context, for reference, I was getting like 18, 20 hours, 22 hours. It's a part-time job. It's just enough per week to pay my bills. Insurance was $100 or whatever for a teenager, and gas was gas. Whatever, gas was 99 cents a gallon or something like that in the late 90s, 98, 99. And this was just a little bit before that. So 4 hours. I see that schedule, and I just showed up for my last scheduled day of the previous schedule, where I had 17, 18, 19, 20 hours a week. And now 4 hours. So I'm in my garb and I get to work. And I'm pretty bent out of shape about this because it's pretty obvious what he's done. So, and maybe he had the right to do it because I had a bad attitude. So I do my thing. I work until lunch. This was a full day shift, so I got a lunch break. And I left McDonald's for my lunch break. I'm in a little Honda. I drive across the road, down the street, maybe a quarter mile to a Subway. A little bit of foreshadowing in a previous episode when I talk about how I worked at Subway. I go to that Subway. And I go inside, and I'm in my McDonald's outfit, and I'm pretty bent out of shape. And there's no customers. I was the only one in there. And the person working is the manager. And she says, what's up? And I tell this story about, McDonald's busting my chops, cleaning a clean countertop. And I just kind of unload. Like, it's just busy work. Like, I'm just venting. And so she goes, well, we're hiring. I said, no kidding. She goes, yeah. And we don't do any of that nonsense. We do food prep. We stay busy. But if it's not busy, we just wait for a customer. But there's plenty to do. But we treat you like grown-ups, and we let you manage your own time. Whatever. She goes, you want to work here? And she hires me on the spot. Now, in hindsight, I look back at this and I think, I'm a disgruntled employee complaining about my current employer. Not exactly what I would recommend in a job interview, but nonetheless, she says, you can start tomorrow or whatever. He hires me on the spot. Well, I'm like, I've only got 4 hours on the next schedule. So another moment that I'm not proud of, but that is part of the story. I owned the pants I was wearing and the shoes I was wearing. I was wearing a McDonald polo and a visor. I chose a visor. I was told after the fact that the females tended to wear the visor and that the men wore hats, but I had hair then and I wanted to wear the visor. I don't know. So I had a visor and a polo shirt. I took it off. I got in my car with my Subway sandwich and my beverage. I drove back to McDonald's. I went through the drive-thru. I went past the menu and the ordering speaker, and I went up to the window. And I handed my apron and my polo shirt through the window, and I said, if you need me, I'll be at Subway. And I drove away. So that's just a sampling of stories from my youth, from my teen years. It's just the tip of the iceberg on ways that I failed or fell short or was a bonehead or a punk and, acted like a teenager, I guess. And so moving on into adulthood, tell a couple of those stories now. So I've already told the story in a previous episode 3, where I almost missed the deadline to apply to be a police officer, where I then locked my keys in my apartment, almost missed the physical agility test and written test for the application process. I had to shimmy up the drain pipe and climb into my apartment. I've already told that story, but that could certainly count as a moment in my life where I did not approach it properly, where I was unprepared, where I didn't have the discipline to handle that situation like an adult or whatever. And so I've already told that story. And so I'll just move on a little bit. I'll talk about it's a setback there was a mindset involved, but it's less of a failure and more of a setback, but a lesson learned. So I do eventually get hired as a police officer, as I've mentioned. And so I went off to the basic police academy. It started in the fall time. And then they do it a little bit differently now. On day one, you're assembled with your class. There were 30, 35 of us or so. And on day one, you're in a room full of strangers who are all from different agencies from around the state. Some people are, might have 2 or 3 from one agency. Like, for example, my agency had 2 guys, me and one other fella, the future chief of police that I hired, if you remember from episode 3. And so I'm in this classroom, 30, 35 people, and the TAC officer, the police officer who leads our class, comes in and says, we need to select class presidents and squad leaders. And so there were several offices. Class president was one of them, vice president, probably treasurer, basic offices that for the 5.5 months or so that we were up there, they would, do the administrative things for our class. And so at 21, I'm 21 years old, and I'm the youngest in the class for sure, by far. And so, but I am full of confidence, arrogant even. And so I think a lot of my skills at this point, I had bought some time in the interim during the hiring process. I had been to the Basic Reserve Police Officer Academy, which is the same curriculum taught locally. And so, I thought a lot of my abilities, I thought a lot of myself. I was arrogant. And so I feel like I'm well suited for any of these offices. I'm not even sure why I'm here, because I've already done this. So not really, like I knew why I was there, but that's sort of the overconfident attitude I had about my abilities at this point. I'd also been not working, but I had been riding along with officers. So I had seen it. I'd been in the thick of it. I'd been in the trenches. And a lot of these folks, they got hired by their agency. They've never worn a uniform, and they're up at the academy. And so sitting from my chair, I'm thinking, well, the things I've seen, sort of attitude. So basically, I've got a bad attitude. I don't want to go too overboard here. Like, I was thrilled to be there. I had a learning mindset, but I did think too much of myself at that point. And so here we are. We're going to select offices. And so president, vice president, squad leaders. And so the squad leaders, there were 4 or 5 of them, and our class would be divided into 4 or 5 groups, maybe 6 groups, I don't even remember. And each group would have a squad leader. So it was just, a little mini hierarchy of supervision within our squad, or within our class. And so anybody who wanted any of these offices simply raised their hand to nominate themselves or volunteer. It's not like we can nominate others. We didn't know anyone. And so anybody interested would nominate themselves. And so I nominated myself for every position, starting with president. I volunteered for that. Now, in a way, this is a good attitude, right? I'm volunteering to do extra, even though anybody you talk to before going to the basic academy would tell you, be a gray man, stay in the back, don't stand out, just get through the academy and get back to work. Don't bring attention to yourself. And so I disregarded this. And actually, I would give different advice, like give it your all, put your best effort in. So I would give different advice, but that's not the advice I got. Anyways, I defied the advice I got. I volunteered. I'll be president. So then, like kids in a grade school class, the way we voted is this room full of professionals, 21 to 35, maybe even a little bit older. We did have one guy who was starting a second career pretty late in life. He might have been 40. We put our heads down at our desk and we did a hand vote, a blind hand vote. So presidents, a couple of people nominated themselves or volunteered, and put our heads down, hands go up. Of course, I voted for myself, and they didn't tell us the numbers for each candidate, but I did not get president. Someone else gets president, no problem. He seems like a squared away guy. And so vice president comes, I volunteer for that. Put our heads down, hand vote. I'm not selected. No problem. Next office, the next office, the next office. Squad leader. Now again, in a class of 30, 35 people, somewhere between 30 and 35 people, like there's a lot of room for people to do these jobs. And so here I am, a little bit surprised that I'm now the squad leader and I haven't been selected for one of these offices yet, but no problem. No shame. I just volunteer for that. So we put our heads down, hand vote, and I'm not selected. It's a setback. I'm disappointed. I don't understand how they can't see how well suited I am for these positions. And let me back up just a little bit. Before the hand vote, because no one knows anyone, we all had an opportunity to stand up and say, please vote for me. I want to lead in this capacity. I want to perform this task. I don't remember what I said, but it did not impress anyone. And it probably had a ring to it similar to, I've been around the block a little. I've been to the Reserve Police Academy. I've been doing this for a few months now. I've seen some stuff. So, seems to me like I'm your clear choice. So appreciate your vote in advance, and see you on the flip side. And so no one selected me for anything, and I was humbled by the experience. I did not immediately reflect on the arrogance or overconfidence that I probably presented, but as years go by, I become more aware of that sort of attitude, and I correct course. Had I not corrected course, hard to say where I'd be now. I think it takes a great deal of humility to improve in anything. I like to tell people it's hard to teach people who think they already know it all. It's hard to work with people as an instructor or in any capacity that think they're know-it-all. You work with people like that. I grew out of it, thankfully, but it's safe to say I would be in a different place now had I not approached the future of my career with significantly more humility. And so that attitude, that arrogance followed me in my young career. Thankfully, I grew out of it. I still battle it like we all do. Probably a personality type of type A, meat-eating people. I think it creeps in every once in a while. But it's important to remember, stay humble, continue to learn, be a lifelong student of the profession, and you'll have more success than being a self-centered, ego-centered turd. So the basic academy goes pretty well for me. I was young. I was barely out of college. Although, let me pause right there. When I got out of high school, I went to local community college. I've talked about that before. I was probably overconfident in that. I had misplaced confidence because in high school I didn't have to work hard to get good grades, to get passing grades, to be in honor society. It came naturally to me. I didn't have to study, and I'm not bragging. It's just one of the gifts I've been given. High school was fairly simple for me, and so now let me stop right there. I wasn't in real advanced classes. I probably would have been much more challenged had I challenged myself. I took easy classes. I took what I needed to get out of high school with a degree. I didn't challenge myself or put myself in a position to take very advanced classes, with the exception of a college prep English class. And so that was probably out of laziness. I don't have a memory of it, but my natural inclination probably was to sign up for these classes that I wasn't going to be challenged by, so that I could get good grades without effort. And so when I went off to college the very next spring, or rather fall, the very next fall after high school graduation, these were a little bit more challenging, although some were still just as easy. I have a specific memory of taking a public speaking class. Even then, public speaking wasn't intimidating to me. I didn't feel challenged by it. But I didn't put the effort into it that the class deserved. I would just show up on speech day and just give speeches, and I'm still getting passing grades because the bar was pretty low. I think most people, it seemed like they were just struggling to get up in front of the auditorium and give speeches. And I just went up there with confidence, and that just, I guess, was a bigger part of the equation. So I was in that class with a friend from college, or rather a friend from high school, and he would, pitch me a hard time because he did not have a love or a passion for public speaking. And so that class was challenging for him, but he put in way more effort in prep for class and things like that. And so, I give that as context for my mindset. I same thing in the basic law enforcement academy. I mentioned earlier that I had just taken the reserve academy in the winter before. So now it's fall. The winter before, I had just taken the reserve academy, and while it's a reduced version, a light version, a lot of the curriculum is the same. The laws are the same, the procedures are the same, the criminal law, criminal procedures, all of that, patrol procedures. It's all the same curriculum, just light version. And so I had been exposed to this material, which for my learning style put me ahead. And so I didn't have to study much in the academy. And so now, if I had, and here's why that's important, I got passing grades. Had I studied, had I approached the academic portions of the academy with the mindset I have now as a more mature learner, I guess, I can only imagine I would have excelled. When I went back to college in my 30s to finish I finished my associate's degree 15 years after I started it. So let me back up one more time. So I was a year into college, and I had that same mindset from high school, and I hit a class that challenged me, and I didn't have the discipline to study properly, and I barely passed it. And then I did not register for classes again, and I got hired as a police officer. Well, in my first department, there was no incentive to have a criminal justice degree or a college degree of any kind. There was no pay incentive. And so I saw no reason to finish that degree. And so I went to work for the next many years without finishing that college degree. And so flash forward to my current agency, there's a minimum requirement of a two-year degree, which you have a few years to get after you get hired. And so I was required to finish it. And so I did. And what I'll say is, in my 30s, I put a lot more deliberate effort into college. I studied hard. And what was different is when I was in my teens and 20s, I was just looking to get by. And I didn't have the discipline or the mindset to win, to get 100, to anything less than perfect was unacceptable when I went back to college. And so it's just the mindset that I had developed over years of being a police officer. And so when I'm back in college tackling this AA degree, it was a breeze, but for a different reason. It was because I went after it, and I'm acing everything. I'm on the college honor roll as a 30-something-year-old, finishing my AA, which is awesome. I finish it. My wife says, you need to finish your 4-year degree. I'm like, okay, I do have some momentum. Seems like the timing's right. There is a pay incentive for that. And also it's a requirement if you ever want to be a captain at my agency. And so I thought, well, I don't really want to be a captain now, but I don't want this degree to stand in my way someday if I decide I want to do it, which worked out pretty good because that job came open shortly after. And so I go back and get my 4-year degree in business management. And again, I'm just focused, highly focused, and giving it my best effort. Way different than I was in my teens and 20s. And so riding that momentum, and this is a years-long process, riding that momentum, I take a short break after my 4-year degree is finished. So now I have a 2-year in criminal justice. I have a 4-year degree in business management built off the credits from my criminal justice degree, although I had to take a few extra classes because I switched from criminal justice to business. And my decision is made. I'm gonna get the master's degree. I've got this momentum. I took a short break, but I stick it out, and I spend another couple years in college with that same mindset. And man, if I could go back, and I know everything has happened for a reason, and my trajectory, my experiences, I've learned from that arrogance and that mindset of my youth. But like, man, if I had the discipline and the study ethic that I had when I was finishing my bachelor's and my master's in my 30s, if I had that back then, I guess I'd be like landing space shuttles on Mars, because it was just such a stark difference. But again, I think that came from the lessons learned from, being a lazy turd and not approaching it properly. But I digress. And so I'm 21. I'm in the basic law enforcement academy, and I have a little bit of I have an arrogant attitude, and I'm breezing through the curriculum because I've just seen it. Like the winter before, so 9 months before, I just saw this curriculum. And so I breezed through with passing grades, not top of my class, like I should have strived for, although we had some really, really bright people in my class. I'm out of the academy. I graduate. It's a proud day. There's a whole big ceremony. Dad comes and pins my badge, and I'm back to work. And so here I am in my uniform, proud graduate of the Basic Law Enforcement Academy, and I go back to my agency to start field training, which this was a smaller agency. We did it a little bit differently, way less formally. I was paired up with a guy who I still know, and if he watches this, which he might not, he probably won't. He definitely remembers this because he reminds me of it on a regular basis. We are paired up on day one. He's my field training officer. I'm driving, and we hit the streets, and I'm a unstoppable force as a newly christened police officer, and a motorist goes by me and commits a traffic violation. How dare you? So I turn my lights on, flip a U-turn, turn my lights on. I'm gonna stop this car. And I want you to imagine like I'm just in a soft city police uniform. I'm not a trooper with the hat or anything like that. But that's how I felt. I'm all puffed up. Motorist pulls into a driveway, happened to pull into a driveway rather than alongside the road. I pull in behind, which is kind of an awkward position. I'm not making excuses, but it was a deviation from a textbook traffic stop, which would be like car along the road, cop car behind it, like you see on the freeway and the highways. This one pulled into a driveway partway. And so I'm kind of in an awkward position behind, and I go marching up to the car. And I don't remember if it was a man or a woman. I don't remember anything about the conversation, except it would have gone something like, "Excuse me, motorist. Officer McNew, you've committed a traffic violation, and I'm going to need to see your driver's license, registration, and proof of insurance." And I get partway through that speech, however it went, when their car suddenly and abruptly jars. It shakes. It shifts. It lunges forward. And at first, I think, how dare you? Where do you think you're going? Or something like that. Except I look back, and my patrol car is now up against their back bumper because it wasn't in park. And I, on my very first traffic stop, fresh out of the academy, a brand new, overconfident, cocky police officer, have rear-ended the very first motorist I ever pulled over on a traffic stop. Now, the car wasn't in drive. I was in a Crown Vic, a 1999 Crown Victoria. I had not put the car in park, but I had hit the shifter just up into neutral. So it was sitting kind of precariously on a little hump. And that's what gave me the time to go up and alert this motorist to their egregious traffic violation. That's what gave me the time, the car being in neutral, sitting on that little hump, to get through my little spiel before my car rear-ended them. At super slow speeds, no damage was done, no one was injured. All that was injured was my pride and my ego. As the field training officer, I'll just call him out, Officer Taylor, across from me, is got a big old grin on his face as, this embarrassing thing has just happened. So, of course, I apologize. We inspect the damage, which there is none, not so much as a scuff or a scrape. And, of course, I allow this motorist to go along with a warning. As I swallow my pride to get back in my car and I drive away. Don't remember making another traffic stop that day, but I definitely remember the humiliation of my patrol car rear-ending the first motorist I ever pulled over. So, flash forward, I'm now a police officer for several years. I'm driving a marked patrol car. I'm patrolling my beat. And I'm sitting in a place where, I'm not getting any calls. I'm doing traffic enforcement. And I'm sitting in a place that is just easy to get speeders. It's a transition from like the downtown residential area to a more rural area. It's very congested. It's a legit place to still have a 25 mile an hour speed limit because there's a park there and there's a lot of cars coming and going and there's people crossing the street. And so it's not like a trap. People should be going 25 through there. And so, but often, especially folks from out of town cutting in off the freeway, they're not paying attention to the congested area and they're hauling through there. And so I make a traffic stop pretty quickly after sitting there every time is my memory. And so I make a traffic stop, and when I turn on the car and make the stop, and maybe they got a ticker, maybe they didn't, I don't know. I'm in a position where it's like, well, I can just sit here and radar for the next. I don't have to go back to the little spot I was sitting in. So I just sit there and I'm like, it's a 25 mile an hour zone. I got the little radar and I'm beep, and radars make a noise. That's a different class, but there's an audible tone. It's a Doppler sound. It's an actual radar, and it returns with a steady tone. Higher pitched tone matches a higher speed, and lower tones, lower speed. And so part of the training is that the speed visible on the radar should be consistent with the tone, the audible tone of the radar. That's way too much nerd stuff about radars. I probably got some of it wrong because I don't teach the thing, but I'm sitting there and it's like 18 miles an hour, 19 miles an hour, 21 miles an hour, 24 miles an hour, 23 miles an hour, like car after car after car. And this is a place where I've just never sat for any length of time and not just had 40, 45, 50 mile an hour cars going by. And so I sit there forever before I realize why no one is speeding. And that is because I'm running radar with my lights on. I am sitting there in the place where I had done the previous traffic stop. I did turn the car and reposition it, but I'm sitting there, lights flashing, trying to run radar. And of course, it's during the day, so I couldn't see the light reflecting. This is before LED lights, it's halogen lights. Currently, and this is not there is a system in cars now where when your light controller is on, it's kind of obnoxious. And I remember when they first started doing this, it beeps at you every couple seconds. Beep, beep. And so you'll be on a traffic stop today and your car is beeping at you every couple seconds to let you know, hey, dummy, your lights are on. So, but back then, we didn't have that. And so I'm sitting there running radar out the window in my little hidey hole behind a blackberry bush. No speeders. And it took me an embarrassing amount of time to realize there were no speeders because I was sitting there with my lights flashing like a dummy. So, flash forward about 10 years from the radar situation with my lights on. I'm on regular patrol. It's spring. It's a super rainy day, really rainy day. And out over the radio comes a vehicle pursuit. Neighboring jurisdiction, county jurisdiction actually, the sheriff's office, they are chasing a car up and over some back roads that are going to lead into my jurisdiction. They started in a much larger jurisdiction where a couple of officers are out with this individual in the car, and they're out on foot. They're contacting the car. He flees, and in the process, knocks one of them down. It was a very close call, almost ran him over. So obviously he's really desperate to get away, and now he's fleeing in the vehicle. That jurisdiction does not chase because they're out on foot, not near their car. Sheriff's jurisdiction gets the sheriff's deputies get in behind him, and they're in a pursuit up and over this hill. And so the pursuit goes on for quite a while. The suspect vehicle's running people off the road, causes a couple of crashes. Pursuit goes on. And so at some point during all of that, he's heading my way. He's a few miles out, and I'm in the perfect position to set up spike strips, which, if I'll just back up a little bit, I've had lots of training in spike strips now. At this point in my career, we just didn't have as much training on it. I didn't know what I know now. There was way less emphasis on how dangerous it is. Listen, it sounds really obvious for me to say, if you get out of your car and you go out into the street and try to throw spikes in front of a vehicle that's fleeing at high speeds, that is dangerous. It seems obvious to say that is a highly dangerous thing, but we just didn't think of it that way. It was just one of the things we did was you stopped cars by spikes. And so, but no formal training, really. Somebody said, here's the spikes, the sharp end goes up, put it in front of the car, class dismissed. You've just been trained in spike strips. Again, we do it way different now. And so our agency had the stop sticks at the time. Very neat tool. It's kind of a triangular shaped box that is in a bag that you drag in front of cars. And no matter which orientation it is in, the spikes impact the tire when the car runs it over. Super cool tool. Now, unfortunately or fortunately, I had used the one in my car the week before on a previous pursuit, and it had not yet been replaced. And so what I had available to me was this old school, you've probably seen them or be familiar with them, accordion style one. They kind of come in a suitcase, they're accordioned, and as you deploy them, they expand in length. And so that's what I had. It was an old thing that was laying around. And so as this pursuit's coming up and over the hill towards my jurisdiction, I go flying back to the department and I grab it. And so this tool does have to be pointy side up, where the stop stick one, you just throw it in any orientation and it's fine. And so a little bit harder to use. It's been vastly improved upon with current tools. So I go driving out to a place where I have good cover. I'm a little bit older in my career now, so I park in a place where my car is concealed, where I have good cover from a guardrail, and the road narrows right there. So it's a little bit of a culvert crossing over a small waterway, maybe a creek or just a runoff. And so the road narrows where I have like a greater opportunity to spike this car as it goes by. And so I'm all set up. The car is hiding. I've got the spikes already. Never really thrown this accordion thing before, although I've used it one time. I used it a little differently on the freeway, like as a very young cop, which is a cool story for later. But I'm all ready. Here comes this car. I can hear the sirens getting closer, as it's making its way through the woods and through the mountains. And here it comes. The time is time. The time is now. And so I throw these spikes. Now, what I now know is it makes because they're on a string, it makes way more sense to this is going to seem obvious, to lay them on the other side of the road when you have time. Stand with the cord on the side that you're on, and as it gets closer, just pull them towards you. But like in the moment with this tool I'm not familiar with, I just huck it. And it accordions out and it lands spiky side down. And so I didn't put any thought into this about how dangerous what I was about to do was. And there's a dash cam of this, although it's probably long gone now. I don't have it because the car was facing this. And when I reviewed the dash cam later, because it did occur to me how close to death I came this day. When I reviewed the dash cam later, here's me running out into the street as this car's approaching to flip the spikes over. Now, I just told you that the road narrows here. It's in between two guardrails and like it's a choke point. And so there's nowhere for the car to go except through these two lanes. There's no shoulder, just guardrail. And so I run out there like an idiot and I flip the spikes over. Well, I flip the spikes over, but it's accordioned out. So the part I flips, but the long end is still flipped upside down and the car runs over the upside down part, doesn't impale the tires, doesn't run over the spiky part. So I drag it out of the road really quick. When I reviewed when I reviewed the dash cam of this, like I'm only still here because the driver decided not to run me over. I am standing in the lane near the center line as it not in the through lane where the suspect's vehicle was going to go. I'm in the other lane, so one of two. I'm standing in the middle of it trying to flip these spikes over as it goes by me. What's a lane? 8 feet, and I'm in the middle of it, so I'm 4 feet from this car going by at 100 miles an hour like an idiot. So no time to worry about that now. I drag the spikes out of the road. I throw them in the ditch. I get in my car and I join this pursuit, which because of the remoteness of the area, there was currently only one deputy in the pursuit. And so I'm in the chase now. It takes me a little bit of time to catch up. Right before I catch up to it, some other folks tried to spike it. It evaded. The suspect in the vehicle tried to run over the deputy throwing the spikes. So that's how lucky I got. The vehicle heads north up this highway, and I'm one of two vehicles in this pursuit now. It's pouring down rain, and we are chasing this car like our hair is on fire. And this is a dangerous guy, right? He tried to run over some cops back at the very beginning. He spared my life for some reason. He tried to run over a deputy throwing spikes at the last intersection. And, so we're trying to get this guy stopped. And I'm not sure if we would chase this car today, if it would meet the criteria for a pursuit. I think it probably would under the current law. But one of the things we talk about now is when you're trying to determine whether to stay in a pursuit, I think the most simple way to make that determination is to ask, is it worth it? Is the risk of this super dangerous thing we're doing on the road where cars are getting run off the road, is it worth it? Probably in hindsight, under the current measurement, this one is not. But can't change that, and so here we are. We're in it. And so we chase it for 10, 11 more miles, high speeds down this country road, and it eventually turns, because he's not familiar with the area, probably down what ends up being a dead-end road. He comes to a stop at a water treatment plant, can't go anywhere. His only way he can go is back towards us, and he bails over the embankment, over the guardrail. And this guy's been running from the cops, trying to run over cops. He's been running for 30, 35, 40 minutes. Been running for a long time. So highly motivated to get away. And so boom, over the hill he goes. and I chased him. I went over the hill. I bailed down this embankment after him into the brush, and we're going down this cliff towards it's a river, I guess. Depending on where you're from, you might call it a creek or a stream, but it's a small river. And so we are now down at the river. I get out my taser. I try to shoot him with the taser. It makes a bad connection. It doesn't work, which, depending on your experience, if you have some experience with a taser, like mine is like 50% of the time, the dumb thing doesn't work. So, and I know a lot of it's shot placement, but these are highly fluid situations where it's not like a two-dimensional target sitting still. It's often got thick clothing and layers of clothing and whatever. There's a variety of reasons why the probes don't work or why they don't make good contact. But in this case, taser doesn't work. And so continue to chase on foot, and I get to a spot where we wade across like calf deep water, so pretty shallow water, but now we're out on a gravel bar in this little river, and the water is clearly very deep on the other side of this gravel bar, which is 10, 15 feet wide, maybe 30 feet long. And so he's backed into a corner. He is at a place where he cannot go any farther without swimming. And you're not wanting to swim in this river. It's cold. It's very rapid. It's dangerous. And so he turns back towards me, and I'm approaching him now at a walk, giving him commands, and he's completely defiant. And I have no tools available. My taser is out of commission because I shot the cartridge that I had. I didn't have an extra for whatever reason, because I typically did have an extra. At the time, I had switched from an expandable baton to a straight stick, the wood ones, teardrop shaped wood ones. It's a very effective striking tool, much more effective than the expandable batons, but way less portable. And so you don't wear it on your belt all the time. You stuff it in between the seats. And when I got out to chase him on foot, I left it in the car. So of course I have pepper spray, but it's a tool you got to be pretty close to use. And so here I am. I got this guy who's tried to kill a couple cops. I'm man to man out on this gravel bar where I guess my tools available are my gun and my fists and feet. And none of which is a great option. I got my pistol in my hand. I'm giving him commands, and I just let him know, like, if you don't follow orders, if you don't follow instructions, if you do not do what you were told, I will shoot you. I will kill you. And so that's pretty much where we are. My taser didn't work. I've chased him down this hill. I don't have my stick. My only tool available is this gun. He has demonstrated a complete disregard for the welfare of others. He's shown some intent to kill police officers, and that's the tool I have available. And so he clenches his fists and he says, "Then do it. Then shoot me." And so thankfully, neither of us had to call the other's bluff, or neither of us got an opportunity to see what would happen next, because help was on the way. K9 units were crashing down the hill. Other officers are hollering. They're coming down the hill. And so he thought better of a fight. I think probably he was sizing me up to decide if he could do something one-on-one, but he thought better of it when help was right around the corner. And so I'm thankful for that. So almost got killed putting out spike strips because I acted foolishly. Left my stick behind, chased this guy down the hill. Tactically speaking, probably could have just contained it, but got the scent of blood and chased him down the hill. It all worked out, and about a month later, I lateraled, not because of this incident, but I lateraled to the agency I work for now. It was one of the last things I did at that agency. And so today, we do a lot of training on spikes, pursuit, keeping ourselves safe, having good hard cover, properly deploying spikes, and not being idiots and putting ourselves unnecessarily in danger. Moreover, we put a lot of thought into whether it is appropriate to chase cars, whether, given the volume of traffic and the jurisdiction we live in and the number of people that are on the road, whether it is worth catching this guy, because we all want to catch the bad guy. We now put a lot of thought, deliberate thought and training into determining whether it is worth risking the safety and welfare of other motorists and the fleeing motorists and the police officers, whether it is worth it to chase that person or whether we can just catch him another day. So today's been about failures and setbacks and lessons learned. I like to use the metaphor of the rearview mirror. It's where we've been. It's what we've done. It has its place, but it's small. It's much smaller than the windshield. The windshield's big. It's because that's where we're going. That's what matters most. The things we've seen, the things we've done, the things in the rearview mirror, they might have been hard. We might have taken some hits, but those are in the past, and we're still here and we're still breathing. So I use that metaphor to remind new officers or my kids especially that we face forward, that we focus on what's in front of us, that we make the right move next, and that every decision, every step is just another step towards becoming not who I was, but who I will be. Keep grinding forward. Keep on going. I'm McNew, and this is Duty, Grit, and Grinds. Thanks for watching.